welcome everyone to this class on karma and reincarnation. Just looking at this picture here, that is a classic sort of Hindu representation of life and death. You've seen many of these kind of things before. We have the wheel of infinity, the infinite cycles of rebirth and death, and of course the man on the left here going to old age and death, and then being reborn as a child and growing up again. Of course, this can happen from one gender to another, or several genders in several lifetimes in a row. And the idea of karma is becoming far more well known now, as we'll explore, and as is reincarnation. I think the Tibetan said in one of his quotes that the idea of death will no longer haunt humanity within the next couple of centuries, which is an amazing thing. In other words, the idea of reincarnation will be widely accepted. So we're really just going into that phase of general understanding. Two subjects today: karma and reincarnation. We're going to deal with karma first. Just a very simple, but also some in-depth perspectives on karma. The law of cause and effect, as most of us know, in thought, word, and deed. Most of us think of it as in deed, as in action taken on the physical plane. But as we get more and more into the understanding the world, the subtle worlds, we realize that thoughts have karmic consequences, as do words. We can see this simple domino effect here in the circle of karma, initiating action, which will come back as a reaction in one way or another. We hear about good and bad karma, positive and negative karma, and there's a cosmic law of karma that controls all life in the solar system. There's the so-called Syrian law of karma, the highest self to this solar system, that determines the karmic life of the solar logos, or the solar system as a whole, of which we are just one part. Of course, we have our earthly, individual, specific karma as well. Karma, we are told, is the effect of deep-seated causes in the mind of God. And that God can be the solar logos, the planetary logos, or the logos of Sirius. Many different levels of consciousness and of karma. Karma can be called inevitable consequence, fate, or destiny. In Sanskrit, it literally means action. And so we have the karma yoga, which means right action. The Tibetan Master DK tells us the result of human experience is the sum total of actions committed through many previous existences. Each action may be slight, like threads of cotton that can be blown away by the wind, yet through the natural process of accumulation, these threads can form a mighty rope, heavy enough to pull a huge ship, likewise pulling the vessel of the human soul and influencing it with good or bad karma. Very interesting definition, and there are many definitions of karma, of course, many kind of modulations or subtleties associated with the law of karma. The Aussie cartoonist Lunig, I don't know whether you can read the words here. There's a young child saying to his father, "Father, what is the law of karma?" And Dad says, "That's the law we hope is more effective than international law." Typical Lunig humour. And of course, we have international karma, we have national karma, we have group karma, we have the country, the specific karma of nations and so forth. Karma of retribution is the best known thought through its negative interpretation. And this is brought about through the lack of ability by humanity to align with spiritual laws. And so we have the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. we have the revenge motive that runs through a lot of our media and movies and entertainment as well. This is very old, age of Gemini stuff thousands of years ago, age of Pisces, but it's not really appropriate for our current age or the age we're going into in Aquarius. We'll gain and glean a greater understanding of the law of karma. Of course, Saturn is the Lord of karma, and Moses on the mountaintop represents that Saturnian karma, who decrees on his tablets the 10 Commandments, the rules by which humanity should live by. Thou shalt not kill, because one will not only incur karma, but prevent that person's working out their own karma. So it's creating complications of karma when we transgress the spiritual laws, which are the ones who have been given, for instance, like the 10 Commandments, and in many other traditions and religions, are a reflection of the universal laws. And so I've written here Aries Libra. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac where action is initiated and taken, and Libra, where we see the consequences of that action come back to us. I've written about this many times, and this is why Saturn, the Lord of Karma, is exalted in Libra. Action and reaction. So we're familiar with the karma of retribution in terms of the negative blowback that comes through negative action. But the karma of reward is much less known, but it will increase. Humanity, the Tibetan tells us, has worked off much evil karma. We have more good karma than bad. We would not evolve otherwise. It's good karma just to be in the physical body with the opportunity to work off karma. Karma has been necessarily punitive and distressing because of ignorance. And I'll read you this other quote from Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. There comes ever in a life in the soul's experience wherein the law of cause and effect assumes importance. From the life the disciple begins to deal with karma consciously and definitely, he learns to recognize it when events and happenings come which require understanding and which evoke questioning. He begins to study the quality of his radiation as a karmic agent, and therefore he becomes the maker and constructor in a new and important sense of his own destiny and future. His reactions to life and circumstances cease to be simply emotional in nature and become deliberately dictated by conscious observation, unquote. So this is very interesting because we can also track karma in our astrology chart. The Tibetan tells us there are 4 lords of karma in terms of the planets. We know Saturn is one of those. I've speculated at various times on what the other ones might be. But we certainly know if we're going through a tough Saturn transit that we're getting a bit of karma worked off or paid off, so to speak, in one way or another, in a negative or positive sense, depending on the aspect. And of course, we know John Lennon's song, Instant Karma's Going to Get You. Great song. And humanity is becoming far more aware of the law of cause and effect. It's something that's commonly known now through all the populace. For instance, this screen grab I did from YouTube of all the videos about instant karma, and the funny videos where someone does something and they fall over and get their just desserts, so to speak. We have this interesting diagram up here with basically saying what goes around comes around with the 2 arrows. We have the examples of karma, such as the country of birth, where we tap into some of the national karma associated with that country, which also, of course, relates to the soul ray, personality ray of the country, the astrological configuration of the nation as well. Whether we choose parents, rich or poor, our education or lack of, our marriage even, our work, the karma of soul destiny, accidents, sudden death or illness, health and healing. All these factors can be karmic events. Most of them are not accidental as such. We have universal karma, as I mentioned before. We have the karma of the solar system. We have earthly karma. We have racial karma, national karma, group karma, family karma, individual karma, and even a car company in the USA called the Karma Car Company. So, and they're not cheap. So this is how it's really moved into the mainstream in the last few decades. Greater understanding, albeit a very crude sort of understanding, but nonetheless a broader understanding than hitherto has been the case for humanity. And we have examples of karma in the Bible, in all religious texts, particularly the Hindu. And so I'm just going to quote a couple of ones from the New Testament. From Galatians, this one: "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." Most of us are familiar with that. And another good example, "And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So if he had sinned, then the only possible way for him to have done so is to have previously lived and committed the acts that karmically resulted in blindness in the next life. And that blind man was predestined to meet Jesus. Jesus' answer was, "Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but the works of God be made manifest in him." And there are other ones coming up that I'm going to give later on. Karma, the force generated by a human act on the exterior world, and the reactionary influence that is in turn generated by the exterior world to act on him, may be called karmic influence. And this visible result produced under proper conditions may be called karmic fruit. So we have 4 stages of karma that we work through in our soul evolution over many, many lives. We start out at the elementary group karma, where we are a completely young and unevolved soul. We're the member of a group, but there's no thought of implications of responsibility within that group. Then we have individual karma of the self-conscious person, because as our individualization intensifies over many lives, we work off karma, and this creates more causes and effects. Then we have the karma of one spiritual group, the particular group purpose and actions, which is more associated with the inner ashram of service that you are consciously connected to, or that one becomes consciously connected to eventually. Of course, then the last stage here is the karma of the hierarchy, connected with initiating causes through world service. We share in the karmic responsibility of the hierarchy. This is what the path of discipleship is all about, is starting to understand the planetary plan and where we can play our part within the context of our Ray ashram with which we are affiliated or members of, and so forth. All those ashrams, as I explained in previous classes, have a chunk of the planetary plan and obviously planetary karma to bite off and chew, so to speak. As to karma, harmlessness is the major agent for offsetting karma in thought, word, and deed. Now, harmlessness is talked about quite a bit by the Tibetan in the Blue Books, and it's not some wishy-washy sort of New Age kind of, trendy thing. It's actually a very dynamic process for you to be constantly vigilant within yourself in terms of not allowing certain strains of thought not allowing you to project negative emotions onto other people, all those kind of things. Because as we looked at before, thoughts are karma engendering. DK says, as to karma, what a person has made they can unmake. This is often forgotten. Karma is not a hard and fast rule. Humanity make it bad or evil through their own stupidities. So, in the Hindu system, there are 3 types of karma. There's sanchita, which is the merits and demerits from all our preceding incarnations or births. Then there's prarabdha karma, which is a portion of sanchita, which affects the present incarnation. That's the chunk the soul has bitten off to chew for one incarnation only, to really look at some crystallized patterns of karma that really need resolving, and thereby choosing the right environment and people, families, nation to interact within, to have the opportunity to work off that karma, because it's always connected to other people through our through our previous interactions with others. And of course, particularly with soul groups, as we have moved through the ages in particular groups. Then we have agami karma, which is the results and merits of demerits of, results of merits, demerits of our present acts, thought, word, and deed. So we can complicate our prarabdha karma through creating even more karma in this life. We can compound our existing karma. And I'm sure most of us have done this in one way or another. Speak for yourself, I hear you say, and indeed I would. So it's a very interesting thing to consider. Of course, if you look this stuff up on the internet in the Hindu teachings, you can get quite long treatises on each of these stages of karma. This is just a basic superficial look at the three parts of karma. And the most common law of the effect, because we're looking at cause and effect, is disease. Karmic impediments work out through the physical body in the many ailments and restrictions that we all suffer from in some way, or which unfold at some point in our lives. And quite often we choose the physical bodies of the parents who can supply a certain physical body that will help unfold that karma. As we'll discuss later, there's some more in-depth quotes about that. For now, I'm just going to stop and pause and look at a couple of comments and questions. Marcia says, is our personality type and emotional body time in a current lifetime also a direct result or consequence of previous cumulative karma? These, or are they related to our soul? Well, both. I mean, when the soul reincarnates, just briefly, I think I've mentioned this in other classes as well, the soul appropriates the permanent atoms, which are the memories of all incarnations in all our bodies, mental, emotional, and physical. And it appropriates those patterns or frequencies when building the new body to incarnate in. Those frequencies have inherently within them the karmic predispositions brought over from other lives. That's a very quick answer for you there. Is it fair to say without karma we could not even exist in these bodies? Says Daniel. Yes, I guess. I mean, karma is one of the reasons why we keep reincarnating. That's why the two subjects are so inextricably entwined. Karen says, so soul groups are also family. What I do not understand is the time element. If you look at families, they get bigger and bigger, children having children, etc. So up to where in a family can we speak of soul group? Well, we can and we can't, Marcia. Sorry, body type, you said. Yes, I get what you said. Quite often there is no karmic relation in families, in biological families. But there is as well. There's quite often there is too. I'm not sure what the percentages are. of, whether it's 50-50 or not. But I know some people who have absolutely no karmic connection to their biological family. I know others, including myself, who do, to one or two family members, or maybe just one family member. So it's a very fascinating area, because what comes into this is genetics and resistance to certain diseases within the family line. We probably know that there are certain weaknesses and diseases that are inherent in one family line or another, that makes you more predisposed to blindness or glaucoma, for instance. And here we go onto that subject. The study of inherited disease indicates a faint recognition of karmic liabilities and karmic tendencies. The mistake lies in the belief that these tendencies are to be found in the germs of life and of substance, brought together at the moment of conception, and therefore that the father or the mother is responsible for the transmission. Such is not the case. The subject in incarnation has, from the angle of the soul, definitely and consciously chosen parents for what they can contribute to the person's physical makeup whilst in incarnation. The vital body, or the etheric body, is therefore of such a nature that the person is predisposed to a particular type of infection or disease. The physical body is of such a nature that its line of least resistance permits of the appearance and control of that which the vital body makes possible. The incarnating soul produces in its creative work and in its vital vehicle a particular constitution to which the parents chosen contribute a definite tendency. The person is therefore non-resistant to certain types of disease. This is determined by their karma. This is from EH, means Esoteric Healing, page 281.
May I ask a question? Oh.
Yeah, you can put your hand up too, but yeah, sure, jump in there.
I'm sorry. I was just wondering if there are certain types of diseases related to particular types of karma. For example, if a person has heart disease, does it mean that they've caused heartache to another person or something in a previous lifetime?
Yes and no. Sometimes there is with the heart. Quite often heart disease comes about through business executives, for instance, who are leaders of big corporations, and they're kind of holding the energy there for all their employees. DK gives an example of that. Yes, but there are some quite specific diseases that relate to karmic acts from the past. Some of them quite obvious. Most of them, for most people, less obvious. We all suffer from various ailments that are hidden, that may not be so obvious to our friends or the public. But we'll get into this a bit more later.
Thank you.
After that, there are three major miasms that correspond to the three major root races: Lemuria, Atlantis, and this root race that we're in now, that concern the three major diseases of syphilis, tuberculosis, and cancer. And we're going to explore that more in the Esoteric Healing class. I had a page for this class on it, but I decided to delete it because it was just too much more information. But I was going to mention it anyway, and so I am now. So we have to learn to recognize the cause. Karma is not inescapable. It can be offset, as we said before. We have to determine the nature of cause and the area in consciousness where it originated. And then we have to develop qualities which are the polar opposite of the effective cause. We practice harmlessness to arrest the expression of the cause and to prevent any further development of the unfortunate condition. Of course, this takes a lot of pondering. I'm just reading this out in a few seconds, but really, to really ponder upon this and reflect on it for half an hour would be ideal. We have to take the necessary physical steps which will produce conditions that the soul desires, such as mental acceptance of the fact of the effect, wise orthodox medical treatment, assistance of a spiritual healer or group, a clear vision as to the outcome. So, so as we said at the outset, karma works out mainly through disease in the physical form, in one way or another. And DK says under the law, it is quite possible to interfere with karma. As we touched upon before, the great laws can be transcended and frequently have in the past and increasingly will be in the future. The energy of faith can set in motion superior energies which can negate or retard disease. This is as little understood as the law of karma itself. Of course, there are many books on karma, reincarnation, many wonderful books, not from this basis of the Alice Bailey teachings as such, but all quite sound renditions of this theme. Master says we can also say that being here as a group studying the mysteries, attending this class today is a result of good karma. Yeah, I hope so. Giuliano says, is AIDS karmic collective? You mean the disease? Or just the three diseases you mentioned as are collective from previous development of humankind? Yes and no. That's a tricky one. That because there's many theories about AIDS being a man-made disease. But one way or the other, there is certainly karma involved in that. Yeah, you wonder about the karma of someone that you see incredibly disfigured or incredibly disabled as they're hobbling down the street. All these are karmic effects that come from one lifetime or another. We wonder about the injustices of the world when we see so much suffering. Is it all karmic? This is the big question. We wonder about the injustices of child abuse, for instance. Those who have been abused, are they working out karma from their past abuses? Possibly some, maybe a lot. I don't know. We can't blandly apply the law of karma to everything and say, oh, it must be karma. But I think most often, quite often it is. But of course, the ones who perpetrate the abuse upon others are certainly sowing many seeds of karma for themselves that will take lifetimes to pay off. And as I said before, if you're going through a tough Saturn transit, like Saturn square your natal Pluto or Pluto square your Saturn or something like that, that can bring up plenty of karmic events for you. Or Saturn square Mars, or opposite Mars. Some of the more difficult aspects, the squares and the oppositions, can bring about karmic events. So we discussed the etheric or the vital body before. The etheric body is a focusing point for all the interior energies of the body, and therefore the energy transmitted will not be pure vital energy or simply planetary prana, but will be qualified by forces coming from the astral, mental, or causal bodies. The causal body being the body of the soul. These qualifications of force indicate the karma of the individual and are the major conditioning forces. They indicate the point of development of the individual and the areas of control in his personality. They therefore indicate the state of his karma. This lifts the whole subject of medicine and into the psychological field and posits the entire problem of karmic effects and ray types. So this is one of the most profound passages so far, I think, related to karma to ponder upon. Indicate the qualifications of force indicate the karma of the individual are the major conditioning forces. And the Tibetan mentions ray types because ray types are more predisposed to certain parts of the body, for instance, as we'll discover when we go through the rays, the 3 ray classes which begin next week. We have part 1, 2, and 3 in the next 3 weeks. And it'll not just be about the rays, it will connect with many other different themes. So out of the Lords of Karma, Saturn is one of the most potent. Saturn forces us to face up to the past in the present and to prepare for the future. Now, Saturn has always been regarded in medieval astrology, the old-fashioned astrology, as a malefic along with Mars. But in fact, Saturn is really a benefic. It's only been called a malefic, as in bad, because of the severe discipline that Saturn imposes on someone who is not living according to spiritual law. It's not aligned with the universal law. Saturn makes sure it pulls us back into alignment in that respect, and that can be a very painful process for some people. Again, another quote from Esoteric Healing: "The problem of overpopulation of the planet leads to the herd life of humanity and consequent economic problem. This unnatural preservation of life is the cause of much suffering, and is a fruitful source of war, being contrary to the karmic intent of the planetary logos." Yeah, this is another very profound, deeply esoteric quote, which we could spend another 10 or 15 minutes trying to understand, but I'm just going to leave it out there for your consideration. Remember, you can go back through all these videos for the classes and pause the video at any point, and just so you can reread any passage and reflect upon it. And finally, we have the so-called Lipika laws. Lipika coming from the word Sanskrit meaning lipi, which means writing, as in writing the Akashic records. Mystically, these divine beings are connected with karma, the law of retribution. They are the recorders who impress upon the visible tablets of the astral light, the so-called Great Picture Gallery of Eternity, a faithful record of every act and even thought of man, of all that was, is, or ever will be in the phenomenal universe. Quite an extraordinary statement. That's from Treatise in Cosmic Fire, page 942. A very profound and complex book of about 1,400 pages, in fact. One of my favorites. Deep occultism. And I remind you all, we are learning about occultism here, or esotericism. It's a science, just as we have to learn the terminology and equations and mathematics, for instance, of exoteric science. Likewise, these are the building blocks that we're learning of esoteric science. And that's why we're putting together this 40-week class, which is just the first ploughing of the field, really, and all the subjects associated with the ageless wisdom. So before we go on to reincarnation, I'll just address a couple of comments. Yes, the astral body is the emotional body, also called the desire body in Buddhism. Someone told me that the sound is difficult to understand. How's the sound for you, Inez?
Well, once in a while the sound fails, but not too much.
Yeah.
So it might not be only your reception, it could be...
Yeah. I think it's just the international, bugs that
yeah,
come in and out of Zoom meetings, and maybe that person's individual connection.
yes.
Sorry that you're having that trouble there. Can't pronounce your name. I'm not sure. Gudrun. Anyway, you're on an iPad, I noticed. Your laptop or your phone might be a better connection in future. Also, just a technical advice. We've had a few technical problems in the last few weeks in other meetings. Check your microphone. plugs, if they've got dust or sand in the microphone socket, that can create problems. There's so many factors that can interfere with good reception. In the drawing, the moon, someone said, Juliana, is represented in the head. Is the moon? Oh, in this drawing, this is just an artistic kind of fantasy, really. Yes, the moon is related to karma in terms of the past. The moon represents the past. It represents the dweller on the threshold, of course, in anyone's horoscope. And the dweller on the threshold is intimately linked to karma. So, yeah, good question. But yeah, so maybe this painting here has more esoteric relevance than meets the eye. Someone said that they have a problem on their iPhone. I'm sorry you're having trouble there, Gabriel. We just have to keep on going on. There's nothing I can do about it. Perhaps if you get the recording afterwards, you won't get any breakup of sound. You shouldn't get any breakup of sound. All right, so we move on to reincarnation. And again, another Hindu kind of painting depicting an old man dying and then his soul being released and eventually finding another form to incarnate. It doesn't happen straight away. With advanced disciples it can, but it varies for average humanity from several years to maybe a couple of centuries, depending on the group karma associated with that individual and so forth. And of course, this is showing him going from one male incarnation to another male incarnation. It could just as easily be a female incarnation. All right, so let me take my microphone before I go on. Reincarnation, also called the law of rebirth, and it works with the law of evolution and of karma. We could call it repeated embodiments to experience and refine ourselves to perfection before we eventually achieve liberation. Unto a perfect man, says the Bible again in Ephesians, unto the measure of the fullness of the stature of the Christ. Be therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. These are very esoteric sayings which relate to the fact that in fact we will all evolve to the level and beyond of what the world teacher holds at this current point of evolution. When we get to that point, which might be thousands or even millions of years away yet, that is the way of the higher and higher turns of the evolutionary spiral. We achieve greater and greater. 2 reasons for rebirth. The soul must return if perfection is not achieved. Unsatisfied desire for life, or our emotional connection, particularly to loved ones. We have, the Tibetan says in one of his books, he talks about emotional families with which we have associations. We all have an emotional family. We may not have necessarily anything to do with our spiritual family as such, but we recognize those emotional connections and those deep emotional bonds. So unsatisfied desire. And of course, many disincarnate beings are hovering in the astral world, still with many unsatiated, unsatisfied desires, hoping to work through people who are incarnate, because they might be trapped on the lower subplanes of the astral plane, the so-called hell realms. They may not have an opportunity to incarnate for a long time. So much suffering going on the inner worlds, of course, as much as in the outer world. The Tibetan says, but really will and knowledge of the plan prompts our return. Well, that's obviously to do with those who have woken up and who have reversed the wheel and who are treading the path consciously as aspirants or disciples upon the path. That is the prompting, the will and knowledge of the plan. And the more we understand or study esotericism, the greater we understand what the planetary purpose and plan is within the mind of the planetary logos. And that inspires us to participate more fully and more consciously in that plan. How do I serve in my spiritual community? And the recognition of our spiritual brothers and sisters on the path is also one of the testings for initiation, we are told. Okay, a few comments there. Thus, the gap between incarnations depends somewhat upon waiting for needed astrological positions and alignments. Yes, very good question, Jem. It does. The Tibetan does discuss this with regard to initiation. If the planetary alignments are not suitable in one life when a person is ready to take initiation, they have to wait for the next life for the planetary alignment to be there again to in order to take the initiation. Damn, that would be a real frustration, wouldn't it? We'll do a class on initiation too, by the way. Initiation is associated with karma too. Obviously, karma is a law that is connected to all other laws in many ways. Of course, we know the soul is already perfect. Its main incentive for reincarnation is sacrifice and service to those who need higher inspiration. The soul reincarnates, of course, not the personality. Here we have another biblical example from Matthew where they're talking about Elias. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. This is John the Baptist. And if ye will receive it, this is Elias, which was for to come, or prophesied to come. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. But I say unto you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not. And his disciples understood that he spake to them of John the Baptist. And so they asked John, art thou Elias? And John replies, no, because he's not that actual physical personality anymore. But he is certainly, that is his next incarnation after Elias. The one, as Elias, sowed the seeds of group karma and individual karma for John, so that he became John the Baptist, and of course dunked the Master Jesus in the River Jordan for his second initiation, as I describe in my book, Masters of the Seven Rays, and the past lives of Jesus. So reincarnation and rebirth can be misleading terms. Better are cyclic impulsion, intelligent, purposeful repetition, conscious in-breathing and out-breathing. Now we hear the doctrine of reincarnation back into animals and insects. This is a distortion of the, particularly the Buddhist teaching. You've probably seen movies and read books where, you know, if you tread on an insect, you'll come back as an insect and incur insect karma. Of course, the Buddhists have a great reverence for all life, and this is part of their doctrine of harmlessness, which is taken, you know, very literally to the physical plane. But of course, we don't reincarnate as animals. We have millions and millions of years ago, our monads have incarnated through the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom, and the animal kingdom. We have all that experience behind us at the monadic level, which is the highest level of the spirit that incarnates into the soul. Quite an amazing thing to consider, is it not? It's really radical. So we're going, the human kingdom that we've reached now is the one where we actually reach liberation and return to the monad after the fourth degree initiation. And so that we don't have to come back unless for the purposes of purely service. So we can start to choose the so-called 7 cosmic paths to exit out of Earth's plane incarnation altogether, out of the solar system altogether, in fact, if we so choose, depending on what path you choose. But I digress. We reincarnate, of course, in the animal signs. The zodiac is the zodiac. So we have the goat, the sheep, the bull, and so forth. And we can be bullish or sheep-like or goatish, that's for sure. I know Capricorns who love climbing mountains, for instance. So we have group rebirth. Individual birth is incidental to the greater happening, particularly when we're more evolved and on the path associated with very specific ashrams that are doing certain particular chunks of service work for the planetary plan, for Samakamara, for the Shambhala plan. Groups of souls come into incarnation cyclically and together in order to further the plan and permit that interplay to proceed between spirit and matter, which makes manifestation possible and which extends the working out of divine ideas as they exist in the mind of God. And so in history, by isolating group activity and character down the ages, we are only able to trace the evolution, we are only able to trace, I should say, the evolution in advanced souls. Groups have rays and astrological signs, of course, which are associated with the ashrams. And so we can trace groups like the Cathars, the so-called mission to Marlborough, the Greeks from the Renaissance through to the Renaissance time in several centuries ago, the destiny of nations over long periods of time. We have the golden age of Greece, which is a great example of the refinement of the arts and sciences back in that time that re-emerged in the 14th, 15th centuries as the Italian, European Renaissance, and all the great souls and very advanced souls that came into incarnation, like Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael and all the rest of them. They were certainly a group that can be identified from other times. Souls come into incarnation according to group urge and thus collectively. This is the basis of collective or family karma. So, Yogananda, his picture is here. By the way, this picture apparently is the famous one that was taken 15 minutes before he did a conscious transition from the body and left the body. Quite interesting. He was a 4th degree initiate, Paramahansa, the great swan, and these advanced souls can do this. And this is written about in the Tibetan literature and Hindu literature as well, this conscious exit. I think there's a book called something like that, Graceful Exits, I think it's called, talking about that doctrine. Anyway, Yogananda has a bit to say about conception. He says, I think this is from his best-selling book, I can't remember the title now. The parents-to-be unknowingly generate during coition an astral light of positive and negative energy currents in the base chakra region, of course, which is referred to the sperm and ovum of the male and female respectively, obviously. When the sperm and its genetic karmic potential from the father unites with the ovum and its pattern from the mother, there is a flash of astral light from this fertilized cell that attracts and guides the physically disembodied ego or soul with its compatible karmic blueprint into the haven of its new primal cell of life. It's a very inspiring quote, this one. Very mysterious, and there's even greater depth to it. There's much more material one could find about it like this. And of course, up to this, I think it's up to a week after coition that a soul can utilize the sperm and the ovum to create that spark, that flash of light, that flash of astral light that indicates the soul's joining, or that establishing that first thread of light that leads to pregnancy and gestation and birth. And I do discuss this in a recent newsletter. I think it was last year or maybe the year before. I can't keep up these days. Showing some actual photographs now that they have of this flash of light. Really extraordinary stuff. So that's conception, but at death, the person becomes very aware. There's a greater clarity of perception. Most of us know this or have been with someone who has died, and they're moving into a very, very deep space of awareness, which is kind of like when you are first born, and many people report the energy within the birth room as being highly charged with the presence of the new soul who's come into incarnation. In death, point 2 here, the time is non-existent, the moment of soul contact. And the person, once he's passed to the other side and is going through the death of the etheric body, because there's various stages, of course, which indicates the so-called 49 days of death, sees the past incarnation spread out like a map, like a video rewind of the highlights. And of course, with NDEs, which are near-death experiences, which people have when they're close to drowning or in a car accident or something like that, their whole life flashes before them. We know that expression. And this is actually what happens when you do die. You get all the highlights coming like a video rewind. And point 3 here, it says the isolation of experiences that were the 3 main conditioning factors in the life. These factors hold the key to future incarnations. All else is forgotten. The 3 seeds of the future are created. And these are going to be karmic seeds, karmic patterns, are they not, of lessons not learned, for instance. So we go on these 3 seeds relate to, firstly, the physical environment, to reincarnating. Secondly, it determines the quality of the etheric vehicle. And thirdly, the astral vehicle and karmic contact with loved ones. So you might come back in and be a mother to the mother you had in a lifetime a few lifetimes ago, for instance. And there may be a karmic connection with that, karmic payback, karmic debt. So after this isolating experience, the deceased person seeks out automatically their group affiliations. And so this is where we get to the other side and we're met, the wife is met by her recently deceased husband, for instance, and other relatives and loved ones who are still on the astral plane and help guide them into the various stages after death. I think there's that movie with Robin Williams that is a pretty accurate depiction of that process. What things may come, or something like that it's called, I think. Well worth a watch or rewatch. On the inner side, people know that the law of rebirth governs the experience process of physical plane living. And they realize then that prior to the elimination of the desire mind or mental bodies, they're only passing through an interlude between incarnations, and that they consequently face 2 great experiences. A moment, long or short according to the attained point in evolution, wherein contact will be made with a soul or soul angel, same thing. After that contact, a relatively violent reorientation to earth life takes place, leading to what is called the process of descent and calling, wherein the person prepares for physical incarnation again. They sound their true note into the substance of the 3 worlds. That note, that soul note, is like a code, a mathematical formula that has everything encoded in it. to build all the bodies for the next incarnation. And of course, as I mentioned before, it revitalizes the permanent atoms which form a triangle of force within the causal body. We're going to have a class on the causal body, so we'll explore that more deeply. Gathers together the needed substance to form future bodies of manifestation. It colors them with the qualities and characteristics he has already achieved through life experience. On the etheric plane, it arranges the substance of his vital body so that the 7 chakras take shape and can become the recipients of inner forces. He makes the deliberate choice of those who will provide the needed dense physical covering or body, and then awaits the moment of incarnation. Esoteric students will do well to remember that the parents only donate the physical body of a particular quality and nature, which will be an adequate vehicle of contact with the environment demanded by the incarnating soul. The parents may also provide a measure of group relationship, as I mentioned before, where the soul experience is long and a true group relation has been established. I know, for instance, I have karma with my now dearly departed father from a lifetime or two in France, maybe even back in Rome, or Rome, as they say in Monty Python. And all of us have these connections, of course, that we've recognized. I just want to backtrack for a second to this point 2 here. After the contact or after the violent reorientation to Earth life takes place. Well, this can happen during a life in a near-death experience as well. I watched a video today, which a short one, about 15 minutes, that I posted on my Facebook page. You can find it there, about a guy that had various ailments, and he had this amazing near-death experience where he was just, it's really quite a riveting description of what happened, and has all the classic sort of hallmarks of near-death experiences and some more. It's very realistic in terms of, he's not making it up. And when he came back finally to his body, he said felt like he was hit in the chest with a sledgehammer. He said it really, really hurt. But the healing of this long-term ailment that he had suffered from occurred 3 days later, and he's never suffered from it since. Very interesting. And so it was a karmic experience, I think, that he had related to the karmic impediment that he'd suffered for a while. And he was given a huge, like, angel eye view of creation, ultimately. So I do encourage you to watch that. Autobiography of a Yogi, thank you. That was the book. Yeah, a really classic book. Really sold millions and millions. Marcia's dropped a big, long passage there, which I don't have time to read. I'm sorry, about Vedanta Karma Yoga. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't read that. But people can read it for themselves if they want. We have, I think, Inez, the transcript is saved and given with the video for watching later on as well. I'm not sure about that, but the Paramahansa was a 4th degree initiate, was his lineage 5th or 6th initiates, that is Babaji. Possibly. His master was, what's his name? Someone's going to supply it for me. Anyway, quite can't bring his name back, but his master was probably a 5th degree initiate. Many of those Indian gurus were like Vivekananda and so forth, were bridges between the East and the West. Yukteswar, thank you. Swami Yukteswar was Yogananda's master. And Aurobindo Ashram I visited in India many years ago. Fantastic teachers, all of them. Oh, thank you, Ines. There's a link to the video.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's move on now to this page here. We're just about finished, so I don't want to go too much over time, but I also want to leave a bit of space for question and answers. The manifestation of the etheric body in time and space has in it what has been called 2 moments of brilliance. This is when we're incarnating. These are first the moment prior to physical incarnation, when the descending light, carrying life, is focused in all its intensity around the physical body and sets up a rapport with the inner light of matter itself, to be found in every atom of substance. This focusing light will be found to concentrate itself in 7 areas of its ring pass knot, thus creating 7 major centers or chakras, which will control its expression and its existence upon the outer plane, esoterically speaking. This is a moment of great radiance. It is almost as if a point of pulsating light bursts into flame, and as if within the flame 7 points of intensified light took shape. This is a high point in the experience of taking incarnation and precedes the physical birth by a very short period of time. It is that which brings on the birth hour. And I'll just make a comment before I finish that. You know, when the soul incarnates, it incarnates in the birth month, but it disincarnates again. This is a law. If you die in the sign of Leo, you'll come back as a sun sign Leo. And the soul chooses that because it's looking ahead several incarnations. So it generally chooses, ideally, when to die. But when it chooses that month of incarnation, which is called the sum of probability, it needs then to incarnate in what we call the sum of possibility, which means choosing the right birth hour to get the right rising sign, which indicates soul purpose for that incarnation. So ideally, the soul gets to choose the birth hour to get the right rising sign that will help further develop soul purpose in that incarnation. And that is directly related to this sentence here. This is a high point in the experience of taking incarnation and precedes the physical birth by a very short period of time. It is that which brings on the birth hour. The next phase of the process, as seen by the clairvoyant, is the stage of interpenetration, during which the 7 become the 21 and the many. These are the 21 minor chakras. And also the many points of light, which are the reflected by the acupuncture points in the body. The light substance, the energy aspect of the soul, begins to permeate the physical body, and the creative work of the etheric or vital body is completed. The first recognition of this upon the physical plane is the sound uttered by the newborn infant. It climaxes the process. And this also, by the way, determines the exact time of birth for that soul, the first cry, first breath. The act of creation by the soul is now complete. A new light now shines forth in a dark place. The second moment of brilliance comes at death. From Esoteric Healing again, page 469-70. So each soul about to incarnate sounds its note, and there are many notes in the orchestra of life. We all have different soul rays, personality rays, astrological conditioning, and these are all frequencies that are our divine programming, essentially. We have the necessary vibration that is set up, and the whole process proceeds under law, under karmic law. And our so-called solar angels, which are our souls, continue the note or sound. The lunar angels respond to certain sounds in that note and will use the specific formulas to build the different bodies. This is very much detailed in various texts about, for instance, when you're in the womb and you're having your astral body and etheric bodies built, it is because there is a signal going out, being transmitted, a frequency that the building devas, these tiny angelic beings respond to en masse and automatically start building according to the pattern that they're being given. And this happens for all of nature, all the forms in nature. And we'll address this in the class on devas and angels and so forth. So these are the lunar angels because the lunar angels are responsible for the form. The solar angels are the soul that appropriates the form for incarnation. So specific formers for different bodies. Fascinating, isn't it? Each incarnation, more refined forms, hence formers become more complicated and sounds numerous. When a seed in the ground, for instance, starts to awaken and the first shoot comes out to the surface, it's sending out a note. It's a frequency, just as a soul incarnate in the womb is doing. And so it attracts the building devas and different types of building devas at different stages of that seed's growth. And all according to the divine patterning that's being emitted or being transmitted. So at the unevolved stage of evolution, it's a slow process. The more evolved, it's a quicker working off of karma. And we have intervals between incarnations, brief or not, according to group work. So if a person is an advanced disciple, for instance, they can come back into incarnation without even returning to the causal body, because most post-death we go through the various deaths of the etheric, astral, mental bodies before we return to the causal body and linger a while. It might be for a period of a few years or a century, or again, depending on cyclic cooperation with your greater group and the ashram. And then you'll be sent forth again from the ashram at the appointed time. But quite often advanced disciples reach just the astral plane, and if they have the permission of the master, and obviously the awareness, then they're allowed to reincarnate almost immediately. So some fascinating discrepancies to the normal rules there that we have. Uranus, someone's quipped, is doing its thing. Yes, absolutely. But also when you have Jupiter opposite a Mercury-ruled moon in Virgo, then it can feel like Mercury retrograde with technical stuff like this. Yeah. So I invite any other comments or questions for the entire two classes, in fact, two subjects.
May I ask something, Philip?
Absolutely, yeah.
I just want to make sure that I understood right, that the incarnation happens at the moment of birth, not during gestation. Is that how you say it?
Well, the first link is set up at conception, for sure. And even before then. And in the future, in the Aquarian age, as per the ancient Hindu teachings, the marriage relation and sexual relation between the partners will be very conscious in terms of attracting certain souls that will provide, because mostly it's an unconscious process for most of humanity, that will provide the right conditions, very specific conditions for specific souls that maybe have specific karma with the parents or not, but needing a specific circumstances to incarnate in, and the parents will provide that. So, but I guess it starts at coition. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that word properly, coition, in terms of the soul establishing the initial spark. Then the soul comes back through at various stages of the pregnancy to check on what's going on with the building processes. There's the 5-month period of acceleration where the astral body is fully built. That's an important stage where the soul looks back in on, and there's probably a few other ones too. The ring past not, someone wants to know what that means. This is an old-fashioned term which refers to the ring past not of Saturn. Saturn confers or infers restriction, restraint, and you can't go beyond Saturn's boundaries, so to speak, beyond the furthest rings of Saturn. So this is the so-called ring past not. There was a certain confinement that we have a freedom within a greater restriction, if you like, where we work off our particular karma. And that's why some people refer to planet Earth as prison planet. It's a kind of lower Saturn kind of interpretation, but there is some truth in it until we liberate ourselves. So it is some people misuse the term, like other terms, of course. What are the 49 days of death that you mentioned? There's a very good book by a Tibetan Lama, I can't remember his name now. It might be called Death and Dying. It was a bestseller back in the 90s when I used to run a bookstore in Australia, the Sydney Esoteric Bookshop. It wouldn't be hard to find. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, or the Tibetan, you can find also similar stuff in the Tibetan Book of the Dead by a guy called Evans Wentz. That's a classic. So that should get you started, I think, on that question. How do we get to know which ashram we are part of? Indeed, we have to know what our soul ray is, ultimately. Then we know we're part of a soul ashram just doing specific work, and that soul ashram will have a sub-ray personality, just as we have souls and personality rays. And that's something that can maybe take a lifetime to figure out or more. So we'll explore this more when we go into the ray classes. Daniel says, I was told our current karmic group is 144 years, whether we spent it incarnated or otherwise. We stick together in the 144-year cycle. Yes, I've run into this, but I take it with a grain of salt. The 144 figure is bandied around a lot. The 144,000 who will be saved, and it's a very esoteric number. It's a fifth harmonic number, as I recall. And so there's always a grain of truth in these things, but I wouldn't sort of look at it as being gospel.